Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today I want to dive into this essay titled "Are Women Naturally Better at Housework Than Men?" And this essay is emanating from a conversation that's happening on Substack right now about the mental load and responsibilities that fall on the shoulders of women versus men. So to give you some context of where this essay is coming from, this woman named Darby wrote it because she got triggered by a Substack post about housework. This is the original post. This is by Lyman Stone, who is a PhD student. And he's making the case that gender norms are the inevitable downstream manifestation of sex differences. And he is responding to this post by Louise Perry, who writes Maiden Mother Matriarch, and she talks about how men don't want to do domestic housework because it is low status and female coded. And so she argues the vast majority of men are profoundly opposed to doing that type of work. And this again is in response to a piece by another Substacker that I've done a separate video about the mental load and why men apparently don't want to pick up the extra labor imposed on them by women. So today's essay is about this. It's about the argument that maybe women might be naturally better at housework than men, or at least it's trying to add to this conversation about why so much domestic work lies on the shoulders of women. So let's dive in. So to begin, she argues the gender revolution of the last century is incomplete. Despite tremendous advancements within the paid workforce, women's incursions into employment outside the home have not been matched by men's contributions within the home. We've normalized the idea that a woman can out-earn her male partner without embracing the notion that men can rule the home front as stay-at-home dads and homemakers. And my argument is, like, men have to want to be homeworks. Like, we're trying to normalize things across the genders when it applies to a minority of people. So there's nothing stopping men from wanting to be homemakers or stay-at-home dads. Just the vast majority of them choose not to or prefer not to do that. In much the same way, like, there's no barrier to entry stopping women from becoming plumbers or welders or mechanics. Just the vast majority of women choose not to enter like physical labor-based trades. And so we're like constantly conflating things within this conversation about gender roles in the home and outside the home. And these myths emerge that, you know, here she argues we've normalized the idea that women can out-earn her male partner without embracing the notion that men can rule from the home. And it's not that we've normalized it. It's just that, like, women have kind of pushed their way into the workforce and out-competed with men in certain roles, that it is normal because so many women are doing it. If fewer women did it, it wouldn't be normalized. And same thing. If more and more dads decided to let their female partners, be the breadwinners, and they chose to be stay-at-home dads, like, that would probably become more normalized too. But I do want to call something out here. So she talks about women's incursions into employment outside the home. And then down here, she talks about the fact that women earn an income and that represents a shakeup for global power dynamics. What this doesn't acknowledge is that women have always earned an income. Like, this isn't abnormal. We need to, like, get past this myth that before the 1950s and before the 1970s even, women just didn't earn any money. They were just sequestered, almost imprisoned. Like, the way the feminist narrative is presented, it's like women were imprisoned in their homes and they weren't allowed to work. They weren't allowed to do anything. And they did work and they did do things. It was just a minority of people chose to do certain things. Like, yes, like Ruth Bader Ginsburg was a pioneer when it came to women's representation in the law. But she wasn't like, she was a minority of women who chose that path during that period of time. It's clearly it's clearly the case that women were allowed to be lawyers because she was a law student and became a lawyer. If it was true that women were only confined to the domestic sphere and weren't allowed to pursue the legal profession, Ruth Bader Ginsburg would have never became Ruth Bader Ginsburg, right? So just because a minority of people chose an unconventional path, or at the time what was unconventional, doesn't mean that across the board women were prohibited from working outside the home. Just the vast majority of them didn't, or they didn't need to. Okay, so she goes in to say that women end up doing more domestic work, even within dual earner couples, not because of gender role socialization or any malingering on men's part, but because women are naturally better at housework than men. So this is her argument here, that women are better at housework than men, and maybe that's true. Okay, so she's gonna dive into this, but one thing she brings up, she says she's pro-marriage, and that one of the reasons she cares so much about the domestic workload is because it's become a nexus of conflict in many couples and leads to dissolution of relationships that might otherwise survive. In the United States, divorce is initiated by 70% women 70% of the time, and disputes over the division of household labor are frequently cited as a reason. So I think this is more of an embarrassment and an indictment on modern women than it is on the perceived burden of the domestic workload. Like the fact that we have no fault divorce where women can all of a sudden start complaining about housework and then cite that as a reason for divorce is insane. And the fact that divorce is initiated by women 70% of the time is just preposterous. And I did a separate video on this. I highlighted two women on social media who they publicly used TikTok to threaten their husbands with divorce, went viral for it, obviously. They didn't end up getting divorced, but kind of put their relationships and their marriages on blast in order to gain clout on social media. And the one cited she wasn't satisfied. The other did cite housework and just the burden of that because it interfered with her career. She's actually a coach on the mental load, so I don't know what exactly her career is. In much the same way, I don't consider myself to have a career. Like, I'm just pontificating on YouTube and writing essays on Substack. Like, I struggle with this. I struggle, like, what is my professional identity? I don't really have one anymore. And I'm slowly coming to terms with that, and I'm honestly okay with it. But it's just this idea that, like women are so burdened by housework that it impedes their careers. But for especially those two women, their careers aren't real careers. They're trying to become influencers on TikTok, and they're leveraging their families and drama within their families to gain clout on social media. But I think what this goes to show is just like how normalized divorce has become for the most frivolous things. Like I can't imagine threatening to end a marriage and disrupt the lives of children because my husband didn't take something out of the dishwasher or folded the laundry the wrong way. And that's what's happening. That's what women are initiating divorce because of little things like that. And so I think this says more about the state of women, and how much we undervalue our relationships, we underappreciate our spouses, and we take our children for granted. Like, if we're willing to throw away relationships because of division of household labor, that says more about us than it says the household labor. I that's just such an insufficient reason to end a relationship and end a marriage. Like, you're supposed to, a marriage is a commitment. And if you're willing to break that commitment because of housework, like, I'm sorry, that's just preposterous. And oftentimes, of course, the housework comes as a stressor because women are trying to be little men and they're trying to play careers for corporate America when, again, maybe speaking from experience here, I hated it. I hated being in a cubicle. I hated being imprisoned. Okay, I felt imprisoned in my office. And to be fair, I kind of was. I worked in a SCIF, which is a secured facility. It's for classified stuff. So I would have to lock up my phone and, couldn't do things. Like, I couldn't just surf the internet while I was in the office. Like, I was a windowless office. You couldn't have like outdoor windows. You couldn't have electronics. You know, when I was running my classified computer, I couldn't listen to Spotify. So, and the, you know, brutalist architecture design, the lighting just was horrible. I hated working in an office. It felt like prison. I hated dressing up every day wearing business casual clothes. I once told a therapist that it felt like I was putting on a costume every day. So, yeah, I mean, I don't, that's a side note, but like women just are trying to play careers, and I don't think women are really designed for careers. I'm not saying women can't work, okay? I'm just saying I don't think women are designed for the 9 to 5 grind. And some are, and those women, at least, you know, the ones portrayed in media, don't seem like the nicest of women to be around. So I think part of this too is the tension between trying to live up to unrealistic career expectations that society has imposed on women, but then also the natural desire and instinct to want to manage a home, take care of a family. And I think the two are in clash with one another. And because women have been given social value based on how they participate in careers, I think that's what they're choosing, and it comes at the expense of their families. And I think this is evidence of that. But I digress. Okay. So she raises a question, you know, what is better in terms of housework? What does better mean? Presumably it means that women will do a more competent job with most housekeeping tasks. But is that because women are more skilled or more motivated? Her use of the term motivated here is, I don't know if it's a good use. Like, I think they're skilled, motivated, and then there's obviously a sense of obligation and duty. I don't know that motivation encompasses sense of obligation or duty. Like, to me, skilled would be a better eye for detail. So a lot of women, not including me, but a lot of women have a better eye for, you know, interior design and that kind of thing. So organization, tidiness, that's something more, they're more skilled at. Motivated, like if you want a decluttered space, there might be a motivation there. But then I think there's also like a duty aspect to it. Like, you want to maintain a harmonious household. You want to do like the chores. Like, you know, I cook every night, and I love cooking. But I think part of the duty of cooking is also cleaning up the dishes. If I were to go work in a restaurant, right, like there would be some responsibilities I would have to do besides just cooking, right? Like, you might, depending on the size of the restaurant, like you might have to do dishes. When I, you know, was a server at Waffle House, you might not know this, but they don't have dishwashers. So all the servers also wash their own dishes. So, I mean, there's going to be tasks associated with a job or a role that you might not want to do per se, but they're part of your job, and that's your responsibility. So like, I don't mind doing the dishes, and it's not that hard. You rinse them out and you put them in the dishwasher. It's not like, you know, you're slaving away in front of a sink for an hour or two. Well, unless I do a lot of baking, then the kitchen can get messy. But like, it's not like the 50s, right? Like, it's not as hard as women make it out to be. Like, you can cook a 1-pot meal and an Instant Pot, and if you really wanted to, you could get disposable dishes. But then you could also, you know, do the dishes. It takes what, like a half hour? Like, it's not that hard. So I don't know. I think it's you. If you have a role in a job, there's duties and obligations and responsibilities that come with that, and you should just do those duties and responsibilities. Again, that's just my opinion. So she dives into here about housework and starts with hunter-gatherer societies. And so she talks about hauling water, tending fire, butchering meat, grinding plants, yada, yada, yada. And she says that from this list of tasks, many of them are in the domain of women. And then she says all of these tasks fall under domestic workload umbrella because they all involve upkeep of the home and family. I find this example quite curious because hunter-gatherer societies didn't have homes. They were nomadic. They moved with the herds. They weren't settled communities. So whatever domestic workload umbrella she's referencing here, the context is completely different. Yes, women participated. Yes, women did things. but you lived within a tribe and you had a duty, again, a duty and obligation, responsibility. If you didn't do certain things, other people suffered as well. And you would get the short end of the stick. Like you would, if you weren't pulling your fair weight, I don't know, would you get, banished from your tribe? Probably. So there was an incentive structure and a requirement, and you were obligated to the other members of your tribe to like do your job. So I don't know that I would agree with like comparing this and looking at it from the sphere of women versus men, because there was just a natural division of labor within hunter-gatherer societies that you had to do in order to survive. And if you didn't do those things, you didn't survive. So I think the fact that you can complain about domestic workload is a luxury belief, or a luxury to even complain about, because prior, our ancestors didn't have that, right? So then she goes on to talk about it during, yes, okay. So she does say hunter-gatherer societies too distal. Better to look at housework from an agricultural society. So this is probably more like medieval European society. Okay. So it talks about things like firewood again, sewing and mending clothes, washing, midwifery, storytelling, gardening. So which of these tasks were done by women? Quite a few, but men actually did most of the baking and brewing, most of the meat processing, all the blacksmithing, some of the medicine, much of the gardening and harvesting, firewood, religious ritual, livestock, shelter upkeep. There was a fine line between home and craft, and some of these activities shaded into commerce. So I will say, there's a book I'm reading right now that is diving into population cycles and rise and decline within populations. And within the book, they do talk about this, like during periods of economic contraction or, recessions before they were called recessions, women often did work. So there wasn't, she says fine line, so I'll give her credit there, but there really wasn't a line between home and craft. Like, you cultivated skills, and more often than not, those skills were practiced within the home, but they also played a role outside the home if it called for it. So if you tended to and mended clothes at home and you gained a reputation for that within your town, you could leverage that during times of economic hardship to add, income to your family. And this was important during this period of time because I think this is lost on a lot of modern people, is that folks in agricultural society, so medieval Europe, they lived at or near subsistence. So you farmed a plot of land and you needed like X amount of land in order to support your family. And if there were times where there were famines or poor harvests, like you wouldn't have enough to subsist on. You wouldn't have enough to feed on. You couldn't just, go to your local grocery store and charge a bunch of groceries on credit, or you can just apply to SNAP and let SNAP take care of you. Like you either produced enough to support your family or you starved. And so oftentimes if that happened, women and children in particular would be the ones who would have to supplement the family income, and they would have to sell their skills and their time for a wage so they could buy food if they fell short. So I don't want this to seem like, again, women did nothing. So the fact that you cultivated a skill within the home that you could then leverage is incredibly valuable. Like I think about this right now, right? We're heading into the AI revolution. And, frankly, white collar workers don't have a lot of skills. I'm one of these people. I'm here, trying to, write online, practicing writing. I've been paid as a freelance writer, so I do have natural talent and skill at this. But at the end of the day, like, if the internet goes down, right, and we live in some crazy dystopian world, what skills do I have? What assets do I have? Well, I can cook, okay? Well, if push came to shove, I would need to figure out, how do you monetize that? How do you do that? So could I do baking? I've even thought of, doing a cookie baking side hustle because I really love baking cookies, and that's something I'm exploring right now. But you need skills. But other than that, like, I don't know how to grow my own food. I'm learning how to garden. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to repair or mend clothes. I don't know how to do much. And so I think this is something that is lost on modern women, especially modern girl boss women, is that the skills they think they have aren't as valuable to society as they've been told they are. There's value in building things and repairing things and mending things and cultivating food. That even the art of like creating soil that can produce a good harvest. Like even if you don't even know how to grow anything, if you can compost and grow, like manage soil, that is valuable, right? Turning produce, turning food into something to eat, cooking is a valuable skill. But so many women, they don't know how to cook, they don't know how to clean, they don't know how to fix clothing. They can barely manage themselves. Clearly, there's problems with the mental load, so they don't know how to manage their families' lives. Like they're not very good project managers. There's all these skills that women think they have that they don't have. And there's going to come a time where they're going to need to rely on skills. And with an absence of those skills, like they're going to be screwed. I hate to like say it how it is, but like that's reality. I've done another video on, and I've written about this with the childless cat ladies. You have all these girl bosses and women who have put all of their eggs in the corporate white collar basket. I think women are going to be the first ones to lose their jobs when AI comes online and it's fully integrated within business workflows and operations, and it has the capacity to work at or above an intern or entry level employee. I think once that happens, and that's going to happen within the coming months, women are going to start losing jobs because the jobs women predominantly take aren't that skilled. And they're not as intensive as jobs that men tend to take. Running a marketing campaign, sorry for all you marketers out there, it's not rocket science anymore. You can execute a lot of that with artificial intelligence and using a variety of different AI tools. So I think women need to learn skills. And the fact that, she says here, there's a fine line between home and craft and some of these activities shade into commerce. I don't think it gives women enough credit that the domestic activities you do can be leveraged and capitalized on when you need them to be. And if women look down on these jobs, and if this is true, by the way, if this is true that the vast majority of men are profoundly opposed to doing low status female coded work, then feminists who model themselves after men trying to be equal to men and competing with men have also coded those work tasks as low status and female coded. So if women are trying to do male coded work, but they're not putting in the effort and they're not cultivating the skills to be able to compete, and they're also simultaneously not doing domestic work because it's beneath them or because they don't think it's fair that they should shoulder the bulk of the workload, they are handicapping themselves because they're not learning any skills at all. And if you're a woman watching this and you think you have a skill, please share it in the comments below. I would love to know. But I'm just, sharing from my experience, my observations working in the white collar world. I don't think women have as many real hard skills as they think they do. Okay. So she goes on to say noble women were usually too busy managing their estates to parent their children directly. So she says that, wealthy women didn't have to do a lot of these tasks, so a lot of this stuff, because they were too busy managing their estates to parent their children directly. How we've come full circle. How we have come full circle. You could replace this with noble women. You could replace this with white collar girl bosses were usually too busy managing their careers or performing their careers to parent their children directly. We do the same thing today. So she says here it was common to send babies to the country for the first 4 years of their lives. We send children to daycare. How is this any different? We behave like the noble women of the past who, were too busy to do certain types of housework. So we had people that we hired out to do it for us. And women can do that. If you're a girl boss and you're earning your own money, you can outsource 100% of your domestic tasks. You can choose not to do them if you don't want to. You have that freedom. You just have to, manage your money and allocate it accordingly. But again, I think there's value in learning skills and the degree to which you want to balance, career with family and domestic work. That's up to you. I've personally chosen a more flexible path for myself so I can ramp up and ramp down as I need to. If you want to work, the 9-to-5 girl boss job, being like a little man, fine. That's on you. But I think this is really interesting to call this out, because we're modern women today are behaving like noble women of medieval Europe. It's kind of interesting. So she argues that the key takeaway of this our essay she's written is that tasks we classify as housework are dynamic and shaped by technology, class, and community resources. So mending clothes, might be a woman's job across many historical epochs. But nowadays, when a garment needs to be patched, I outsource the job to nearby dry cleaners. To accomplish the task, I must drive a car and exchange money. Two activities are considered unwomanly in some cultures. That's not considered unwomanly. A lot of women participate in the economy everywhere. Unless you're living in, Taliban, Afghanistan, there's not very many places where women don't participate in commercial transactions. But yeah, I mean, she highlights, her ability to take clothing and mend it and, not have to she can pay someone else to do it for her, basically. So they have that, this is a luxury modern women have. You can outsource whatever you want, and you can do that as paid outsourcing, right? So you can pay someone to take care of your kid for you in daycare, or you can also rely on your network. My best friend at home, she has a plethora of biological and non-biological aunties and grandmas and grandpas who are more than happy to watch her baby when she needs to go do things. So she still, leverages child daycare like a lot of working moms, but she also has options, which I think is fantastic. So outsourcing doesn't have to be paid, by the way. Like if you live within a family network and community and you have resources that you can tap into, there's lots of older ladies, I'm sure, out there who would love to take care of little babies for, next to nothing. Okay. So she talks about women entered the work world in greatest numbers when we shifted from a manufacturing to a service and knowledge economy. Okay. So that is true to some extent. But I would also caveat that women have historically, like I said, always worked, but they've been sought out as labor because they've always been cheaper. So during the Industrial Revolution, like women's fingers were more nimble, and so they're able to work with greater dexterity using machinery of the time. Same with children. So they were sought after. Women and children likewise are also more docile, so they're easy to control. So you could convince women and children to work for lower pay, to work longer hours, and to do more dangerous tasks, and they wouldn't fight back the same way that men would. So they were definitely sought after. And so the fact that, like, authors like this say women entered the world of work in greatest numbers when we shifted from a manufacturing to a service and knowledge economy. Like, yeah, you may have seen more people taking office jobs, but I don't like how this is often framed because it diminishes the role of women preceding this period of time. Women did work. They often worked in very dangerous conditions. Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire is a great example of women caught in dangerous working conditions. And I don't think we should whitewash history and say like women didn't work before that. Women clearly did work, and they were often exploited. So I personally, my take is that in the 1970s we underwent a massive paradigm shift when it came to how the economy operated. There was rising inflation. Deindustrialization led to the loss of blue collar jobs. So in part, and then as this was happening, there was also the cultural stuff that started in the late 60s and progressed into the 70s. You had a new round of feminism, Gloria Steinem, all that stuff. So I think culture coalesced with economic transformation, and this pushed women not only out of necessity to enter into the workforce in numbers that they hadn't previously been participating in the workforce, but culture also shifted such that they started to derive social value from being a working mother rather than a stay-at-home mother. So I think those two things happened concurrently. And I think because of that, more women felt compelled to enter the workforce than they had in previous generations. Okay. So she says, if we agree that it does not, we can, oh shit. I don't like her writing either. She like jumps a bit. So she says the landscape of home has shifted in similar ways. Men are supposed to like gadgets and the home is now full of machines. Does the specialization of women into housekeeping roles continue to serve our collective interests? I think she's implying here that men should do housework because men like gadgets and we have a bunch of household gadgets. Men maintain those things. I don't know about you, but like when the dishwasher breaks, I don't know how to fix that. I'm not the first one to fix that. I call my fiance into the kitchen and ask him to figure out what's going on. I think most women do that. So men do play a role. They fix things and maintain things in ways that women don't. So she says if we agree that it does not, we can arrive at a more adaptive divide, one that allows partners to figure out for themselves where their skills and interests lie and what roles make sense given their other constraints and obligations. For many couples, that might look like a traditional division of labor, and that's great. Other couples may wish to negotiate different arrangements. Again, I'll give her credit here. She doesn't write like as many other feminists do. This is a more, I say, libertarian approach to housework, just kind of let people figure things out for themselves. I think that's the right approach. If you, like I prefer to do like the bulk of household labor, and I think that's a good for me, and I don't hate it at all. That's what works for me. If you don't, and you're a working person, you can either, figure out how to divide the housework more equitably, or if you have an income, like start outsourcing it. Like there is nothing stopping you except your ego and your perception of your social value in the woman sphere from hiring a maid to come in 2 or 3 times a month, clean your house. There's nothing stopping you from hiring a laundry service to do your laundry. You could even hire, like, private chefs really aren't even that expensive anymore. People don't even think about this, but you can either go buy a bunch of stuff at Costco, like pre-made food, so you never have to cook again, or you can like use Thumbtack or TaskRabbit or any other gig economy platform and hire a professional chef to come in like once or twice a month and do some bulk meal prep for you and put stuff in the freezer. Like there are so many options now for modern women, where this issue and the complaint of the mental load and doing too much housework really is a moot point. Like the fact that you aren't trying to solve the problem for yourselves and you just continue to blame your husbands for not doing enough work really tells you where the priority is. Like there is no actual priority to solve the problem. Women just want something to complain about so they can absolve themselves of responsibility for taking actions for their own choices. But I do like her framing here. If just do what works for you. Don't care what anyone else does. It's none of your business. Move on. Okay. Oh gosh, yeah, I don't like how she wrote this. Okay, so there's like this idea that of hopelessness that like you can't convince men to do more in the household. They say things like, I can't picture myself ever naturally remembering birthdays, immunization schedules, or the names of my kids' friends' parents. So this comment reflects a level of hopelessness. And then, the woman is simply better at it, or this feels more fundamental. Okay. It strikes me as a surprisingly passive given the level of agency that men are typically encouraged to show. Okay. The assumption driving the comment is that the work the wife is doing, the noticing of disorganization, the remembering of birthdays, is not effortful or deliberately undertaken, but rather a fundamental extension of her identity. Therefore, it cannot be learned or socialized or equitably shared. I think maybe, women are more detail-oriented, so maybe women just happen to, remember these things. And maybe there is a social element. I think women are judged to some extent on their ability to celebrate. Like, women are the linchpins within communities, and women make up and frankly constitute the majority of society. So if you're evaluating the world based on key milestones, so that's birthdays, graduations, marriages, deaths, all that kind of stuff, and women are society, and your acknowledgement of those key events within society falls on the shoulders of women, then I can see why women would naturally undertake those responsibilities. Like, even if you're talking about kid's birthday, for a mom, it's like a reflection of her parenting in the woman sphere and across other moms. So it's imperative for her to do a good birthday party, whereas for men aren't part of society. They're not part of the women's sphere. So they're not being judged in the same way. So I think it can be learned, but it comes down to how those key things, those tasks, remembering the mental load stuff, like how that is transmitted within culture and society. And For men, it's completely different. For women, if you don't have a tidy home, you're judged for it, right? But men, if you have a functional home, that's sufficient and good enough for you. So I think it has to do with how women judge other women. So I do see how she says it's a fundamental extension of her identity, but I think that's because of the women's sphere and the pressure that other women put on women to meet certain arbitrary expectations. I don't think it's necessarily a part of her actual intrinsic value or identity, if that makes sense. Okay. So where does this leave us? Are women better at housework? At times, yes, women show greater motivation to perform certain housework tasks than men, but gender socialization and culture clearly shape the performance of domestic workload. Again, women are the ones creating the social expectations and the culture that other women are expected to follow. So if other women have signaled that women should be the ones doing domestic work, well, that's the women's sphere doing that. It's not the patriarchy. Hi guys, editing Amanda here. I'm still trying to learn how to do all of this stuff, and it's not necessarily intuitive to me. So I apologize. As I was like combining some clips together here, you can see the picture froze. So for the remainder of this video, it's just gonna be my voice and a frozen, not very flattering picture of myself. So I'm sorry about that. I'm using a Canon EOS Rebel T6 to film. And so if you know how to troubleshoot that, or like, you know what's happening, sometimes it like, clicks, like almost like you're taking a picture, and then it like freezes, and apparently it doesn't unfreeze. So if you are a camera whiz and you know what's happening, and can offer some guidance on troubleshooting on my end, I would appreciate that. All right, back to the video. Perhaps there's a better, simpler explanation for gender disparities and the division of household labor that doesn't require us to damn women with faint praise. Men don't want to do housework. It's boring, repetitive, low status, and does not bring them success within a domain they consider valuable. Diana Fox Tilson, this is the woman who wrote the other mental load essay I commented on, but she puts it more succinctly. While women gain social capital by performing domestic labor, men lose it. Housework is a female-coded activity in a culture that devalues femininity. Of course, men want to steer clear of it. Women may not be naturally all that much more motivated to do housework, but men are definitely motivated to avoid it. So this seems to make the argument that women are just picking up the slack for men because it's a coded activity that men sees as beneath them. But I want to call out this sentence here. Housework is a female coded activity in a culture that devalues femininity. Who's devaluing femininity? The woman's sphere. Other women. Because when you get to be in your essence and do domestic things, like, it's an opportunity to express your femininity. And this is, again, something I've personally experienced. I've, thought of sewing as beneath me, feeling, in the past ashamed of cooking and ashamed of doing housework, because the female-centered, the feminist narrative right now puts primacy on working outside the home and building a career. It's feminists that devalue femininity. And I always felt like a tug, and like I couldn't be my authentic self in the feminist world because I wasn't able to express my feminine side. I always felt like I was overcompensating with more masculine tendencies, and it just burned me out. It was exhausting. Not even just, being the provider and the protector the entire time, but knowing that I had to take care of myself and like manage my apartment at the time and my household, but then also being kind of shamed for spending the time doing that. Feminist women put more value on your ability to perform your career than on your ability to, manage your household. And this is an example of something that comes to mind, but just look at gift giving, right? Like, how many career-oriented feminist women, like, what does their gift giving habit and practice look like? What do they do? They'll send cards, maybe they'll like order a gift card, or they'll order something, right? They'll it's never anything personal. right? You're just like rushing to buy things. And I saw this when I babysat in DC. Like, this broke my heart. There was one boy, his dad traveled a lot. And so I watched firsthand as they would do like nighttime and their nightly routine. And the kid would speak to the dad through an iPhone or an iPad. And he like didn't understand why his dad wasn't there to put him to bed every night. But, you know, I saw how, you know, career-oriented people tried to compensate for their lack of presence through physical things, through gifts and gestures like that. And that's, you know, if you have the choice of that or between something homemade or handmade, you know, what is better? What is more preferable? You know, I would rather have something that's homemade and created, something that's more feminine because it's made, than something that is purchased. You know, it's just something I value more. One of my closest friends every year sends me a jar of apple butter for Christmas, and I absolutely love it. It's like my favorite thing in the world. And I think that is what's valuable. But we as a society, and, you know, feminist women in particular, we devalue that. We say like, no. That's beneath you. You shouldn't do that, right? You should go do something else more valuable, however they ascribe value. And that's often working. And so I think you can see it, like, if you look at gift giving practices and how we do that, this day and age, it's all about, it's very performative and it's purchase oriented. It's not oriented around crafts or creating or cultivating or developing something that like requires skill or like domestic, anything that could be considered like domestic, you know. Someone would be more inclined to buy someone like a box of crumble cookies than go and make cookies for that person, you know? And I think that gives you a good indicator of like where our heads are at. But housework is a female coded activity in a culture that devalues femininity only because women have devalued that. Women are the ones who have coded it as feminine and female, and women are the ones who are devaluing the expression of femininity. All right. Okay. Oh, this person again didn't, this is just my minor gripe. There's a footnote function on Substack and they didn't. So this is going back to above. This was the asterisk at the top here. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah. Women's incursions into employment outside the home have not been matched by men's contributions within the home. And then she references she says, over the course of a year, women are devoting about 6 weeks worth of 40-hour work weeks to unpaid household work. And men are getting an extra month's worth of 40-hour work weeks of leisure. Okay. I hate this framing because it assumes that women are being forced against their will to do work that they're not being compensated for, and that in exchange, men are just having leisure time. Like, within the framing of this, it assumes there's an inequality there. But women choose and have agency to do housework regardless of whether or not it's paid. Like, spoiler alert, but there are people in this world where money isn't everything. Like, I'm sorry, but, you know, for me, like, I will always cook a home-cooked scratch meal. That is more valuable than any money in the world. You cannot pay me to keep me out of the kitchen, okay? Like, that's just how it is. So me spending more time in the kitchen does not signal unpaid household work. That is not something I am not being paid. Like, it doesn't matter whether there's an exchange of money. Like, money has no place in that conversation because there's an intrinsic value of a home-cooked meal that you just can't put a value on. Hi, guys. But then on top of that, it's the assumption that men are just like doing leisurely things. Men do projects all the time. Like, men are tending to the home. Sure, they might be resting and relaxing. Their workloads are incredibly strenuous for a lot of guys, and they don't get credit for that. So yeah, I wouldn't assume that just because women are doing more, they're doing more without their own voluntary consent, and they're not necessarily doing more and giving men leisure, and men aren't just living lives of leisure as a result. I think that's incorrect. Okay. She says the couples that get closer to a 50-50 division of household labor are actually female breadwinner couples. Okay. That's interesting. I guess, you know, if that's how you want to run your household, again, like, that's your prerogative. You do you. Okay. And then she has some other stuff here pertaining to her audience, but that's what I got. Again, found this hard to read. I think a lot of people within academia have trouble communicating their thoughts and ideas outside of academia. So they're very verbose in how they talk about things. But I think some of the language in here clearly tells there's a feminist lens to it, although I think she's more neutral of a feminist. She's not as crazy about feminism as some of the other folks I've read. But again, this idea that women might be better at housework, that is probably true, but the conditioning to do housework also has to do with the woman's sphere and society, and women constitute society. So women may be naturally endowed to do things, and the fact that we have conversations around unpaid household labor is in effect shaming women. It's saying that we should be ashamed of doing unpaid work, and that we should be ashamed of doing work inside the home versus outside the home. And it puts money as the primacy and the focal point. And it's not, like I was saying with gift giving, I think that's a really good example, because like you can't put a monetary value on a homemade gift or a gift that has a meaning or an intention or a purpose behind it, right? You can put a monetary value on something you go to the store and buy, but you can't give necessarily value on something you give. So I think that's an important distinction. I would love to know what you think. Like, are women better at housework than men? And if you're a dude and you don't do housework, do you see it as beneath you? Like, do you agree with this concept of female coded work? Or, you know, do you think that the work you do in your day job more than compensates for not doing housework, right? Like, do you think, like, if you're a primary breadwinner, or if you bring in, like, you earn the most for your household, do you think that the financial value you bring and the effort you exert at work kind of gives you a pass on doing more household chores? I'd be curious to know what folks think about that. And, you know, are we intrinsically better at this than others? Is housework in of itself a social construct? Like what do you think about this? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Again, if you like this video and like this commentary, I'd love it if you would subscribe. That'll help me build up this channel. And I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.